A very good evening, please come. Very good evening, everyone at Tushita and everyone joining online. And we are very happy to welcome Venerable Geshe Tenzin Namdak again to Tushita, Delhi. And tonight, Venerable Geshe will teach on courageous compassion and ultimate reality. And although Geshe doesn't really need an introduction, I'll just quickly read his short biography. So Geshe Tenzin Namdak initially worked as an environmental researcher after graduating in hydrology. He received ordination from His Holiness the Dalai Lama before pursuing formal studies in Buddhist philosophy and psychology at Sera Jey Monastic University in South India. He completed a full 20-year Geshe program at Sera Jey and a traditional one-year Vajrayana study program at Gyumed Tantric College in January of 2019, becoming the very first Westerner to achieve this. Currently, Geshe serves as the resident teacher at Jamyang London Buddhist Centre and is also a part-time tutor at the University of Oxford. So we are very happy to welcome Geshe again. Okay. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation, and I request you to please teach. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me. I've been here many years. I think first time I came to, I didn't teach then, but it was probably 95 or 6 or something like that. Also welcome. So before we start, maybe it's a good idea to set the motivation, as we always try to do. It's a bit echoing maybe. Set a good motivation, because whatever we engage in, if it's in normal life or it's particular in spirituality or even more in Buddhist practice, is very important to generate the correct motivation. And then the more profound the motivation is, same as dedication, or the more vast, you could say, the motivation is, the better outcome. Yeah, so you can motivate yourself to get a little bit of happiness today, or you can motivate yourself to have happiness this life, which is, from the Buddhist perspective, quite short, because this because today is very short. That's pretty obvious, but even this life is also quite short. Yeah, so it's maybe 80 years, if you're lucky, or maybe more lucky, maybe longer. That's it. Then bye this life. All right. So that's why we always try to emphasize also motivation that goes beyond this life, and then, well, in particular, a motivation for achieving a precious human rebirth in future lifetimes, or even better, liberation from samsara, or even better than that, enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings, right? So that's kind of what we call the 3 scopes of the motivation of the Lamrim. But yeah, if you're not a Buddhist, then you don't have to do that. You can just have a secular motivation of just try to be a good human being, or become a good human being, or a better human being, and then try to help self and others, right? So yeah. So try to generate either of those motivations for yourself. Yeah. Yeah, so and then I recite the refuge prayer. If you're familiar with that, you can recite along. Otherwise, you can just pray whatever you'd like to pray for, right? Sangye Chedan Soni Sonam La Janjo Bada Dani Gyazo Chi Dagi Chinso Gibe Sonam Ki Dola Penshe Sangye Doba Sho Sangye Chedan Soni Sonam Janjo Bada Dani Gyazo Chi Dagi Chinso Gibe Sonam Dola Penshe Sangye Doba Sho Sangye Chedan Soni Sonam Janjo Bado Dani Gyazo Ji Dagi Chushe Gibe Son Dola Penche Sangye Doba Sho Gangi Tuzini Zibe Tawatanchi Pamachi Damchi Gotam de la Chatselo. Yeah, so that's traditional. We always start with a quote in the beginning of a teaching or a talk. So today, that quote by Nagarjuna is, some of you might be familiar with it already, is a very important quote. Yeah, that Arya Nagarjuna praises the Buddha for a particular purpose. And that quote, that if you want to translate it directly, it means, so moved out of compassion. Yeah, because today the topic is courageous compassion. So moved out of compassion. You who eliminate wrong views. Yeah. You, teacher of the sublime Dharma, to Gautam Buddha, I pay homage. And so Arya Nagarjuna is paying homage to the Buddha, and not just because the Buddha looks so amazing, or the Buddha teaches so amazing, or the Buddha has such an incredible mind. He teaches the Buddha for a particular purpose. Yeah, or sorry, he praises the Buddha for a particular purpose. Yeah, so the first one is moved out of compassion. That because of the Buddha's supreme motivation, that, as we know, compassion is the wish for others to be free of suffering. Maybe too close or no? Too far. Oh, yeah. So, so the wish for others to be free of suffering, right? That's how compassion is defined. And then the Buddha is moved out of compassion. So moved means, like, technically speaking, we say uncontrived. Yeah, so that means it's natural. For us, our afflictions are natural. Yeah, so to get angry or obsessive desire is very easy. We don't have to put too much effort to it. You just have to look at an image and it comes. Yeah. But when we talk about practicing patience or compassion, we really have to sit down and do our breathing, and then we have to analyze, right? So we have to put effort. But then when it says you moved out of compassion, that means that the Buddha has, generated this incredible mind over many lifetimes. Yeah. And then that habituation is so strong that it becomes natural. And it's very similar for us. If you just first time you drive these days, you have electric cars without gears. But in the early days, you had a car with a gear, and you have to look in the mirror. The first time you drove a car, you have to really conceptualize. Oh, now I have to do this. Now I have to do that. But after some time, it becomes natural, right? It becomes same with learning a language. If you initially learn a language, you really have to think, and then you just pick up the first word of the sentence, and then you're busy with thinking about it, and then the last word of the sentence, and then in between you lost. You know that feeling if you learn a language? But over time, it becomes spontaneous, right? That you pick up everything without too much effort. So that's kind of an habituation pattern that builds up. So same with compassion. If you build up the habituation, then over time it becomes spontaneous. Yeah, same with every form of mind or development. If it's positive or negative, the power of habituation is very strong. And we see the same in neuroscience with neuroplasticity. It can be in a positive way, but it can also be in a negative way. That the mind can actually change the brain by the power of habituation patterns. Yeah. So then when Nagarjuna said you moved out of compassion, that means that the Buddha did habituate himself to compassion over so many lifetimes. Right? And then things become spontaneous. Yeah. So that's a vast vision. So courageous compassion has to be seen in a kind of vast vision. And that's very, very clear in this particular tradition. I always share an advice I got myself from the previous Ganati Rinpoche, the head of the Kuluk tradition. I was quite close especially with the middle way studies, so I often went up and debate, and it's very interesting to clarify doubts. And then when I had my own doubts about the system, and you probably have your own doubts sometimes about your own development of your mind and things like that. So then he always used to say, such an incredible practical advice. He used to say, Namdak, he used to say, look, you study for a decade or two, you put it into practice for a decade or two, and you do that for a few lifetimes, and things will become stable. Right? And that makes sense, right? That really makes sense. Because even in one lifetime, habituation patterns will build up, right? If you study something, you forget. The next time you look at it, it becomes quicker, it becomes easier to mind, right? Because habituation is there, So the more seeds we plant, the greater the harvest. Yeah, so that's kind of with every form of development. Yeah, so in this case, with compassion, if you do that day after day, then you can imagine over time it develops, and you multiply it with a few lifetimes, and then you can imagine it becomes quite stable in your mind. Yeah. So that's the first line. Arya Nagarjuna is praising the Buddha. You moved out of compassion, because based on the Buddha's compassion, the Buddha doesn't make a distinction between friends or enemies, or those who benefit or those who harm, because deep underneath the surface, all beings want happiness, don't want suffering. Right? People are just temporarily obscured by afflictions or disturbing emotions. Yeah. So, if you think like that, it's very similar as the example we always use. If a person is drunk and says something nasty to you, you think it doesn't matter, the person is drunk, right? But if a person is full of anger and shouts at you, it's the same thing. The person is just overpowered by anger, right? And deep down below, the person also wants peace of mind. Yeah, it's very true, you know. And then even more true is that the person who says some nasty things to you, actually not, the words are not harming. It's your reaction that harms, right? Because if you train your mind over time, then whatever people tell you, it doesn't matter. You know, whatever people think, it doesn't matter. Yeah, Lama Zopa, who was the spiritual director of this organization, he was kind of an embodiment of this mind training. He didn't care at all what people thought, and he even cracked jokes about his own kind of limitations. I mean, he projects that, right? Yeah, so a very interesting manifestation of that. So that means that the real suffering comes from the mind. It doesn't come from outside. So we often think that when we're facing problems, we always think it's somebody else's fault. Yeah, it's never our own fault, right? It's always somebody else. But actually, the real suffering is created by ourselves. Right? So yeah, moved out of compassion means if you habituate your mind over a long time to discompassion and loving kindness, then yeah, you move in that direction spontaneously. Yeah? So that's the Buddha's kind of way that we, in one way, we can trust or rely upon a person who has this realization of compassion, or this uncontrived form of compassion. So that's the first line of the verse. The second line of the verse, so the second line of you who eliminate wrong views. It's not a wrong view, you wrong and I'm right. You know, it's not that kind of wrong views, but the wrong views in our own mind. The Buddha helps us to eliminate the wrong view in our own life, in our own mind. Yeah, so if you believe it or not, I mean, there's a bit kind of depressing kind of aspect of our existence, but yeah, all our perceptions are mistaken. Sorry to say that, but that's how it is. Yeah. So that means our perceptions are mistaken, we say in Buddhism. They don't have to be wrong, they can be correct. You know, we know this person is called Tashi or John or whatsoever. Yeah, that's correct. But the way things appear to us, that's kind of mistaken. Yeah? And that's what we talk about ultimate reality today. We're going to talk about courageous compassion and ultimate reality, right? Yeah. So when Nagarjuna said you eliminate wrong views, then the Buddha Nagarjuna was referring to the Buddha who eliminates these wrong views of misunderstanding reality. Recently, recently 2 years ago, I came in contact with a neuroscientist called Anil Seth. I don't know if you know him. He has a very he wrote a book called Being You. It's kind of a world-class bestseller on the new findings in neuroscience. And he has a very interesting term. He says, he uses very interesting terminology. He says it's not his own finding, but it's from previous neuroscientists, that what is an hallucination? An hallucination is non-perception. Yes. Yeah. And what is then perception is a controlled hallucination. It's a very interesting term. Yeah. So when we had a dialogue, also we talked about subjective aspects of consciousness and how things are actually correct or incorrect, or how we perceive things and what actually is a reality. So most of the things we perceive are mistaken. Why are they mistaken? Because the way things appear to us, they appear as very solid, as very concrete, as very intrinsic aspects of reality. Even if you look in the face, if you look in the mirror, you see your face, and then you think same as yesterday, right? Or you think same as tomorrow. I mean, the first time you look, and then you start reasoning, right? But what appears to your eye consciousness is kind of same. But it's not the same. And even your body in the morning is not the same as your body in the evening, right? But it appears to be the same. Yeah? And that's why we struggle with death and dying, because we always grasp to permanence. And then when somebody passes away, then it's a bit difficult to accept. Yeah, and we all have that very strong habituation. Yeah? With the pandemic, it was very clear. Then we thought, how is this possible? Yeah, I was in Eastern Nepal, I was doing a retreat, and without internet. And I came out of the retreat, and the whole world was completely different than before the retreat. So I'm back to Kathmandu just the day before the borders were closing. The border to India was closed already. And I thought, I have to go back to India, you know. And then many people said, sorry, Namdak, the borders are closed. I said, that's not possible. Because we grasp to permanence, right? Yeah, so luckily I got a last flight out of Kathmandu to London. And then, yeah, went back to Jamyang. But we grasp so much to permanence, right? That's very clear. Yeah. So that's also misunderstanding of reality. Why is that misunderstanding of reality? Because our mind is stuck with the misunderstanding. We crave and grasp at the misunderstanding of permanence, or as we know, the misunderstanding of the afflictions. Yeah, obsessive desire overestimates the qualities which are not really there. You order your favorite food online or whatsoever, you have all these expectations, or the newest mobile phone, you have all those expectations, and then when the object, the food is there, or the casa, the mobile phone is there, then the satisfaction is not really there. Why is there no satisfaction? Because your expectation is not going to reality. Yeah, you expect so much because of attachment to think, if I have this, I will be happy. If I do that, I will be happy. You know. Same with meetings. I always use my mother as an example, and she knows that a lot. She knows that I'm using her in my talks, and she gave her permission. But my mom, when I go back to see my mom, once in a while, then she said, Namdak. She calls me also Namdak, actually. Martin was my previous name, but because she respects what I'm doing, and she has some interest in Buddhism. So she said, Namdak, you know, before you come, I look so much forward, and then this, that, I'm doing extra shopping and make sure I have everything in, you know, for you here to cook and everything, and then I look so much forward to you being here. And then when we're here together, it's like before. And then you go, and then sadness is there. That's attachment, isn't it? I said, very good, Mom. Because it's true, right? We have, it's nothing wrong with being with a person or social activities or having a nice meal, but attachment, that's the problem. Yeah, you overestimate the qualities of its object, and then those qualities are never met, and there's no satisfaction. Yeah, we know that. I can get no satisfaction, and I haven't found what I'm looking for. I don't know how profound their understandings were, but it's true, right? That we're looking for something, but it's not really the satisfaction is there. Yeah, so that's basically out of attachment. So there's a misunderstanding of reality, and you project aspects of kasa, causes for happiness. You project qualities that are not there. Yeah? So that's attachment or obsessive desire. The stronger the desire is, the stronger the disturbance of mind becomes. Why? Because you have this expectation, and this is the reality, and that doesn't match. And because it doesn't match, you're not satisfied, or a bit kind of unsatisfied and a bit disturbed by it. Right? So that causes so much disturbance. Why does it cause disturbance? because it's not according to reality. If you live in accordance to reality, then when you meet a reality, there's no disturbance. Same with old age and death. You know, if you live with that reality, then it's much easier to accept. You know, yeah. I just mentioned the story of meeting Tutor Miché. Now it's Tutor Miché, and in Tutor Miché's house, there's a monk. He is in his 90s. He's very old, very good health. So last winter I was there and I had to wait a little bit. So I was talking with him, and he said, "Yeah, I'm waiting. I'm ready, waiting already to die." You know, so it's very interesting. Yeah, they completely think differently. Yeah, we grasp so much to permanence. Yeah? And then when they know they're going to die, some know that, and then they give away all the possessions. Yeah, we had one very interesting. We had one chanting master in Sera Jey. 3 months before he passed, he was training other monks very intensively to chant the prayers we normally chant. And then 3 days before he passed, he gave away all his money to the monastery. And just without any possessions, he just completely satisfied, passed away. So I thought, wow, that's amazing. In Gyumed, there was one monk who gave away all his possessions, but he didn't die. Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, yeah. So, but you know, that's the thing, right? That if you understand that reality, there's no shock to the system. Yeah, and with anger is the opposite. Yeah, with attachment is overestimating the qualities, and with anger you overestimate the faults. You see so many faults in a person or an object, and even in Western psychology, it's very similar. Yeah, like Aaron Beck, one professor from the University of Pennsylvania, he also says a person in rage of anger, 80 to 90% is just mentally fabricated. It's not a reality, and that causes disturbance, right? If you only see faults in others, then, and even a person pats you on the shoulder and says, "Oh, come on, this person also has qualities," you say, "No, not true," because you only believe in your own misunderstanding of reality, and that causes problems. You see, so then, but when Arya Nagarjuna said in praise to the Buddha, right, the second line of this verse, you eliminate wrong views, he didn't really talk about directly, indirectly, yes, but not directly about these afflictions like anger and attachment. Of course, anger and attachment are not in accordance with reality, but the main fundamental aspect is the ignorance, yeah, that causes these afflictions to arise. Yeah, the ignorance in particular of grasping at an inherent or intrinsic, sometimes we say, from its own side existing self. So, is there a self like that? Is there a self? Or is there no self? What do you think? Is there a person sitting here and listening or not? Yeah, there's a person sitting and listening, right? But is that person existing from its own side as an independent entity? It appears like that, right? Often it appears, you know, I'm listening, or I want this, I want that, or, you know. So that's very clear. There's a sense of an I there. And it's important to understand which self or which I does exist and which self or which I does not exist. That's a very important distinction. Yeah? So this, from its own side existing independent self, is not really there. Yeah? So one of my favorite physicists, David Bohm, you know, very interesting personality. He also says, I don't know if you have saw the movie Infinite Potential. It's a very interesting movie. Infinite Potential is a movie about David Bohm's life and ideas. Yeah, and towards the end of that movie, or the documentary, it's very interesting. He walks behind a few trees and he comes into, into the side of the camera, and then he says something very interesting. That, you know, this he calls it the self-identity or this self-deceptive thought. This is a very interesting term, yeah? Because it is a deceptive thought. Yeah? It's misunderstanding reality. So then he says this self-identity or the self-deceptive thought is a cause for many problems in society, because it makes a distinction between us and them, and that causes one country to want more power and security, and then fighting others. And we see that very clearly in present politics on the other side of, not on this side of the ocean, but from Europe, it's on the other side of the ocean. So some presidents and politicians, they're very much into the narcissistic aspects of life, right? And then that creates a lot of problems and conflicts. Yeah? So David Bohm, who is a physicist, he said, because he understands dependent origination, he says this self-deceptive thought, or the self-identity, it is this, what in Buddhist terms we call it, this intrinsic or this inherent self, is a cause for many problems, because then you have two aspects there, two important aspects, if you want to explain it in great detail. One aspect is what we call the grasping at a self, or adherence at a self. And the other aspect is the self-cherishing aspect. There's two aspects, self-grasping and self-cherishing. And they're related with each other. So, because there's self-grasping, there is self-cherishing. And when there's self-cherishing, the self-grasping becomes stronger. And it's very, very similar with, we just talked about anger and attachment. Because there's a strong sense of an I, anger and attachment also become stronger. When anger and attachment become stronger, there's a stronger sense of a self. Yeah, so that's very interesting correlation. So it's a kind of loop, right? The loop of the matrix, or whatever you call it. If you want to get out of the loop and take a red pill, then I was in Google in London, Google Cloud head office. They asked me to give a talk during well-being week. And it was very interesting. They showed me around in the office, and we went to the basement, and all kind of, fitness studios and music studios, and for people to, relax or try to be more productive in work, basically. And it was a very nice, it was a whiteboard. I think some of the employees made a joke, and it was like they grew a red pill and a blue pill, it's from the movie The Matrix. And then the pole of today, and then cross out the pole and put the pill of today. And then there were more scores for the red pill than for the blue pill. And so in the movie The Matrix, things becomes more violent if you take the red pill, right? But in Buddhism, actually things become more peaceful if you take the red pill. If you want to stop samsara. But the trigger is, which is very interesting in that movie, I was forced to see that movie. After Buddhist, I was not much interested in movies anymore, but they forced me to look at it. And a few of my friends said, "Oh, you have to see this, you're so Buddhist, blah, blah, blah." So then I looked at it. But it's interesting. There are a few Buddhist aspects. There's the agents with the little dark sunglasses, and then the head of the agents is called Mr. Smith. And Mr. Smith is very similar to the habituation patterns of our negative thoughts. They want to take us back to samsara, right? Because the stronger the habituations are, the stronger the draw comes backwards towards samsara, right? We already talked about the power of habituation. So, so how do I got there? I just want to see how I get back. Sometimes get completely lost in my talks. So where I went to? Yeah, and before that? Yeah, okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah. So there's two aspects, right? Self-grasping and self-cherishing. Yeah. And then I said also, when the afflictions are stronger, then the self-grasping becomes stronger. Yeah. And it's also very similar in science, right? If you look in narcissistic characters, it's very similar that people with a higher score of self-interest, so to say, then they show a more complex form of an emotional life and with more complications. Yeah, very clear. Yeah, the science behind these aspects is very clear. Yeah. So if you think there is an inherent I, then the identity of yourself like that is also very strong. Yeah, so then, but we just talked about, does it exist or not? Remember? And then I went to David Bohm, and then I said, David Bohm said the self-identity or the self-deceptive thought is a problem for society. And then we went into this loop of politics, right? Yeah, so, but also, David Bohm says, which is also very striking, very interesting terminology he's using. He says, but the self-deceptive thought is not really there. It's just a show. But a very convincing show, he says. And that's why people take it as an apparent reality. It's very interesting terminology, right? So that means we take it as an apparent reality because the habituation is so strong. The stronger you habituate yourself to something, the more you believe it. Yeah, you just see it like a few narcissistic politicians or presidents, they just say openly, you just keep lying and people start believing it. Yeah, it's very true. So that means that we lie to ourselves. We have actually been the greatest liar since beginner's lifetime. You know, we always taught ourselves that there is an inherent I there. And many lifetimes we even said it's good to be angry, or it's good to have strong desire and keeps us alive, things like that, right? Yeah. So we have got all these kind of misunderstandings of reality since beginner's lifetime, very clearly. Yeah. So, and all this anger and attachment we just talked about, they're lying to us all the time. Attachment tells you, believe me, you get something out of this, right? Yeah, it's very true. And then we believe and then we're stuck. And we don't get what we actually expected to get. Yeah, there's no satisfaction. Anger also is that, oh, just follow me and you accomplish something. But actually the opposite is true, right? If you're a leader, then it's much better to be selfless, you know, and have compassion. It's very clear, and the science is also very clear behind this. You know? There's a very interesting book. It's a bit old now. They have 2 books. There's a potential project. There's a kind of people who are Buddhists. I mean, they study a lot of Buddhism, and then they use the principles in a secular way. And they many years ago they published a book called The Mind of a Leader. So that was published together with Harvard Business Review reports. It's a very, very good, scientifically very interesting science. That the 3 pillars for a successful leader is mindfulness, selflessness, and compassion. Very interesting, you know. And they did it's just a small research. They interviewed 35,000 leaders in different companies and different levels. Very interesting. And the newest book came out, I think, a year ago, is The Compassionate Leader. Yeah, very interesting science. So it's not only a Buddhist principle, right? These things. So so these afflictions like anger, attachment, and in particular ignorance, that's the root of all of it, is then going in this loop of self-cherishing and self-grasping. The more you grasp at an inherent self, the more you cherish yourself, and the more you think about only yourself and don't like to think about others. And it causes problems, not only in your own life, but also in society. Right? Very clear. So this self-grasping, so to say, that's the root of samsara. Yeah, that's the root of all our problems. And the Buddha taught various teachings to eliminate this root of samsara. And that's why Nagarjuna praised the Buddha by saying, you eliminate your own views. Because if you understand that everything is in the nature of dependence, everything is related, then things cannot exist in and by itself. You cannot have a self-identity like that. Yeah, so, and that's exactly what these scientists in quantum mechanics come to the conclusion, like David Bohm or more modern, or present time, Carlo Rovelli and people like that. They very clearly, they completely agree with the theory of Arya Nagarjuna. Yeah, like Carlo Rovelli's relational quantum mechanics theory is very interesting. It's almost, I mean, he told me himself that he read some works by Arya Nagarjuna and he was amazed to see that, and even in a private conversation we did dialogue, but also we met online. He's so interested in emptiness that he asked me at one point of time, he said, Namdak, do I have to become a Buddhist to really understand it? So that kind of interest he had. I said, no need to become a Buddhist. You can study it and analyze it and read the commentaries, and then you will generate an understanding, So that's very interesting. Yeah? So then this teaching, because that's the third line. Yeah, we did two lines, right? We said you moved out of compassion, you eliminate wrong views, and then the third line, you would teach the sublime Dharma. Yeah, so Nagarjuna is praising the Buddha, and then he said, you teach the sublime Dharma. So the sublime Dharma is the Dharma of dependent origination. Yeah? Or the teachings on dependent origination, because if you understand dependent origination, you understand that things cannot exist in and by themselves. Yeah, we're dependent. Yeah, our body is dependent on food and air and what else? Water and temperature and so many things, right? And our mind also constantly reacts to things we see or hear. It's constant dependence there. But so that means that if you look in your body, you can from your tip of your toes, you can scan all the way up to the crown of your head, and you see all the different bones and organs and skin and things like that. And then not you see that, or you imagine it's up there because it's there. Then also you multiply that with time, right? You go dimension of time, and then over time, all those cells they change. Yeah. So every day is depends on which cells you count, but it's like, or is it a billion or 3 billion? I've got a number. Cells changing. I think a few 100,000 cells every second or something like that. So if that's the case, then your body is just in constant change, right? There's no independent I to be found anywhere in the body. The body is there, it's pretty obvious. You knock your head against the wall here, then you know there's a wall and you know there's a body. Your head is there, right? But when you look in the mirror, the body appears very solid, you know? Or when you look down, you think, oh, it's the same, you know, very solid. But actually, it's in constant change. There's nothing solid at all. And with the mind, it's even more easy to see that the mind jumps like a monkey from one tree to the other, or can sit still. Or little birds, they can sit still, right? It's constantly. You know? So the mind is a bit like our monkey mind is very much like that. You know? Unless you have very strong concentration, then you can stay on an object. But most of us, I think, our mind just jumps from here to there. Yeah. So then you can see that even in the mind, and then the different types of consciousness, sensory perception, mental consciousness, there is no independent I to be found. Yeah? So there is a consciousness, there is perception, there's an ID, there's a feeling and sensation and things like that. But there's no independent entity to be found anywhere in consciousness. There's no independent I to be found anywhere in the body. And then you put your body away, and then there's no independent I to be found separate from your body. Yeah, that's quite clear. So then if you understand that reality, that everything is in nature of dependence, then you start to see dependence of the changing aspect of our body, for example. That's one level of dependence, right? The dependence of cause and effect. Yeah, we have normally we describe 3 levels of dependent origination. The first one is the dependent origination of cause and effect. That things are related and things are in the nature of change. Yeah, so because over time the cells they change, you put in some food and then things come out of the body, you know. And so that means there's a constant cause and effect relationship going on. Yeah. And that's one level of dependent origination. The other level, the second level of dependent origination is the dependence on, you could say, parts and a collection of parts, right? There's a correlation between the individual organs and individual parts in those organs and the whole of the body. Yeah, there's a relationship between those two. Yeah. And because of that relationship, then also there is no independent I to be found between the individual parts and the whole, right? Yeah, so that's the second level of dependent origination. And then the third level of dependent origination is a bit tricky one, merely imputed by the mind. That means if you look for your body, actually you cannot find it. If you look for your mind, you cannot find it. That means that the inherent body you cannot find, an inherent mind you cannot find. Yeah, so your body, if you say, what is your body? What will you say? If you have a real kind of a technical answer, what is your body? Then you could say it's an imputation of body based upon the mere collection of the various aspects of your body at a particular period, at a particular location, right? That's what your body is. Yeah, so then you can see it's just basically an imputation. We say body based on my body being present at a particular time or time frame, let's say an hour, and that's my body over an hour. Yeah, the cells that change in that kind of period, right? So that's nothing more than that. When we say merely imputed by the mind, it doesn't mean you have to sit there and say, okay, this I'm now going to name body. That's not the way to look at it. The way to look at it is, where is the I? Oh, sorry, where is the body in this case? Then we look, it's not here, it's not there, then what actually is the body is just the name body we give to a mere collection of cells based, assembled at a particular time and location, right? So that's kind of what we call the most subtle level of dependent origination, or being merely imputed by the mind. And so because of those three levels of dependent origination, of cause and effect, parts and a collection of parts, and being merely imputed by the mind, you prove there is no, from its own side, existing entity to be found, right? Yeah, so if you read Carlo Rovelli's, not his newest book, but a book he wrote like 2 years ago, I think, almost 3, Helgoland. In that book, in chapter 5, he gives a very interesting description of a chair. What actually is a chair? Then he says, basically, it's nothing more than just an imputation based on assembled aspects that is suitable to be called a chair. Very interesting. So it's very close to Arya Nagarjuna's form of what we call merely imputed by the mind, right? Because they see in the theory of quantum mechanics that there is no solid entities to be found. And so when we talked about difference between consciousness and matter, then he said, but matter is not that solid as it looks like. Very interesting. Yeah, so it has similar properties as consciousness, right? Yeah. So yeah, then you see that because of this dependence of cause and effect, dependence on parts and a collection of parts, dependence on being imputed, yeah, or just a name, what is the body is just this particular aspect that is assembled at a particular period of time. If you have those three levels of dependent origination, then you see that proves nothing exists in and by itself. Yeah, so that's kind of what Nagarjuna is praising the Buddha for, because that's the key to understand emptiness, right? Emptiness is not nothingness. Emptiness is emptiness. It doesn't say nothingness, right? So emptiness meaning empty of something. Yeah. So if you say, always use the example, the emptiness of the elephant, right? The room is empty of an elephant. Yeah. Or so that means that it's not mere nothingness. There's just no elephant there. So in a similar way, when we say actual emptiness, is kind of there's no inherent existence there. That's what it means, right? It's not nothingness. It's an absence of something. So that's what we call emptiness. It's the absence of inherent existence, or intrinsic existence, or independent existence. Yeah, because that doesn't exist. Yeah, there are no. If I say there's no elephant here, then the elephant doesn't exist in this room, right? In a similar way, when you say there is no inherent existence, it's the same thing, right? You refute or you negate something. Yeah? So you either negate the elephant that's not there, or you negate something you think it's there. But we always project this inherent existence. We think it's there, while it's not. Yeah? So that's why we're wandering around in this cycle of samsara. So then if you understand this dependent origination well, then you understand emptiness. If you understand emptiness, you have the antidote to its ignorance. Because ignorance apprehends an inherent I, and emptiness apprehends the absence of the lack of that inherent I. So there are two completely opposite minds, right? So the more you habituate your mind to the absence of inherent existence, the ignorance of inherent existence loses its potential and slowly starts to fade away. And that's kind of the way out of samsara. Yeah? If you realize emptiness is the mind that, yeah, same with an elephant or no elephant. There's two completely opposite things, right? Elephant or no elephant, it's completely opposite things. If there's no elephant, then an elephant cannot be there. That's pretty clear. Yeah, so if you see there's no inherent existence, then inherent existence cannot appear, right? Yeah, so particularly with a direct perception of that. So that proves that this wisdom realizing emptiness is the actual antidote to its ignorance, or the actual antidote to the root of samsara. Yeah? So if you understand that aspect, not only the root of samsara being ignorance, but also understanding emptiness, then you think liberation is possible. And that's kind of the real, kind of what we call the real fate in nirvana or moksha or liberation. Yeah, if you really understand these aspects, and as Holiness said, the more you understand emptiness, the more you will understand the possibility of liberation. Yeah, so that's very clear. And also in many commentaries, yeah, it says, if you want to know, there's commentaries like that if you understand emptiness more, in Gyaltsab Jay's commentary on the Lama, for example, it's very clear that the more you understand emptiness, the stronger your initiation becomes. Because if you understand emptiness, you understand ignorance. And if you understand ignorance, you know why we're stuck in samsara, right? So that's very fortunate. And then in a similar way, if you understand emptiness and you train in compassion, your compassion will increase. And it becomes a very courageous compassion. Why does it come a courageous compassion? Because you see why sentient beings are suffering, and you see it's possible to liberate them. Right? So that's kind of a real constructive form of mind, very powerful. And then if you have this vast view, as we talked about in the beginning, of lifetimes, then becomes this incredible heroic kind of approach. Yeah? This compassion becomes so courageous. Then it doesn't matter whatever obstacle you face, you're just gonna walk for enlightenment. Right? So that's kind of, the more you understand independent origination, the more you understand emptiness, and the more you understand emptiness, the stronger your compassion becomes. Yeah? Because you can actually see why beings are suffering, why people are stuck in samsara, and you see how to help them, how to get out of them. Yeah? So there's many quotations in the sutras, but the logic and the commentaries, for example, one very famous one is Shantideva, right? The Shantideva in particular, chapter number 9 in Bodhisattva Charavattara. Then in chapter number 9, in the first verse, if you read the commentaries on the first verse, it's very clear where Shantideva said that all the branches of the teaching of the Buddha were there to prepare the students for the teachings on emptiness, right? So then in the commentaries, you will read that it's so important, and then that one of the commentaries actually puts it to the extent that if you understand emptiness, compassion automatically becomes stronger. It's not that the mind of realizing emptiness becomes compassion, but the more you understand emptiness, the more you understand the antidote to is ignorance, right? And if you have some compassion, because compassion, as we saw, is a mind that is defined for beings to be free of suffering, right? So if you know the cause for suffering, and well, the root cause for suffering, then you understand suffering. If you see it's possible to eliminate that suffering, because it's possible to eliminate ignorance, then you also see that it's possible to free sentient beings from suffering, right? So the definition of compassion is to free sentient beings from suffering. Yeah, so then suffering you have to understand, and the possibility of freeing them you have to understand. So if you have a mind that understands emptiness, you see those two things very clearly. And of course, there's different types of compassion. There's the compassion of how wonderful it would be if all sentient beings were free of suffering. And then there's the compassion of may they be free of suffering. And then there's the compassion of I will cause them to be free of suffering. Right? So this third one, I will cause them to be free of suffering among the four immeasurables, right? Then that's very strong, because if you see that beings are suffering, you know why they're suffering, because of ignorance, and you see it's possible to liberate them, then this courageous kind of responsibility of what we call in the 7 instructions, of course, in the fact, the special intention, right? This becomes very strong. That you know why people are suffering, and you know it's possible to eliminate that. So then this incredible force comes to do it. So that's kind of whatever happens. So that's kind of but His Holiness also refers to compassion should be joined with wisdom. His Holiness often says, and then you have what His Holiness often refers to is ninja. The compassion is focused upon sentient beings, and wisdom is focused upon enlightenment, so that if you see what we just talked about, the wisdom that understands emptiness, you see it's possible to eliminate ignorance. You see it's possible to lead sentient beings to enlightenment, right? Yeah, because bodhicitta has 2 aspirations, as we know, right? Bodhicitta has an aspiration of, the wish to liberate sentient beings, and to do that, which is the kind of this courageous compassion. Yeah? And for that purpose, you want to become a Buddha, right? So then also there you see those 2 aspirations are related with compassion and this wisdom of understanding the possibility of liberating them, right? Yeah. So that's the aspect of courageous compassion and kasa and ultimate reality, right? Because the ultimate reality is the ultimate reality of emptiness. So that's Arjana's, go back to his, you find this verse back in the if you want to, in the 27th, if I'm correct, 27th chapter of the Fundamental Wisdom text by Arjuna, where it says, you move to our compassion, you eliminate wrong views, right? And we just talked about. You teacher of the sublime Dharma, to Gautam Buddha I pay homage. And so then, to Gautam Buddha I pay homage is that Arjuna praises the Buddha because of these qualities we just talked about. Yeah, that the Buddha is moved out of compassion, this kind of spontaneous, uncontrived form of compassion, that is built up over many lifetimes. And then you eliminate the wrong views, that the Buddha is capable of eliminating the wrong views, and in particular, the wrong view of ignorance. Yeah. And how do you do that? By the 3rd line, you would teach the sublime Dharma. Yeah. And then which sublime Dharma is the sublime Dharma of dependent origination? Because if you understand dependent origination, you understand interdependence. If you understand interdependence, you know things do not exist the way they appear. Things do not exist in and by themselves. Yeah. So that's how you eliminate ignorance, and then by doing so, then you see the possibility of leading sentient beings all the way up to liberation and enlightenment, and you know why they're stuck, and you know how to do something about it. Yeah. So that's why Arjuna praises the Buddha. Yeah, not because the Buddha is such a superior person or looks so amazing or so famous or whatsoever, only because of those qualities. Yeah, because that's true. That's the kind of stopping the suffering of beings, right? That's what Arjuna is praising, and that's all there. Yeah, that's all there in these kind of teachings that helps us to understand our minds and helps us to eliminate these kind of afflictions or disturbing emotions, and to train the mind more in constructive ones. And in particular, the most constructive mind you can imagine is the direct perception of emptiness. Right? Yeah. So the direct perception of emptiness is eliminating all these afflictions, from the root, and then that leads you to liberation. And if it's motivated with bodhicitta, it leads to enlightenment. Yeah? So according to our motivation at the beginning of the session, then we said, okay, Buddhist motivation, you could think about perishing rebirth, you could think about liberation, but you could also think about enlightenment for the benefit of sentient beings, right? It depends on the motivation. Yeah? So that's why motivation is always quite crucial in these aspects. Yeah, I think, that's maybe enough blah, blah, blah for this evening about, compassion and how it relates with emptiness to the bridge of dependent origination, right? Yeah. If there's any questions, then feel free to ask. I don't know if there's online questions and how we do that, or do we? Can we do that? They put in the chat or something. Or, I don't know. Yeah. So, is there any questions or doubts or?
Yeah, online you can raise your virtual hand, so we know you want to ask a question, and here just raise your hand, and then we can pass this mic around for people online also to hear your question if you have.
Yeah, you don't have to have the virtual hand. You can just use your real one. Yeah, and otherwise I have some questions. Oh.
Geshe, thank you so much for coming.
Mm-hmm. Maybe use the mic, then people online can also hear.
Yeah. It's very basic. Could you please explain attachment again?
Attachment.
Yeah.
Attachment is a mind that overestimates the qualities of its object. Yeah, so it's not according to reality because it just projects something that is not there. Yeah, we technically say superimposes. Yeah, it superimposes qualities that are not there. Yeah, so that's true with food. That's true with objects of attachment, or with relationships. You have more experience with that than I do, I suppose. Yeah, you always have these expectations. Yeah, Lama is over you give a very interesting story. You do the last go on course. So interesting. He said, then it was very attached to a person. He said, "Oh, you can't wait to be with this person," right? And then you're with the person, and then it's not according to, it's okay. And then there are some problems, and then you say, "I can't wait to be separated from this person." Such an interesting story. Yeah. So, but attachment is also very subtle. With food or with holidays or activities, the stronger the desires, the more expectations there are, and the mind gets really diluted. And then you think, if I have this or I do that, I get really happy. But then the happiness doesn't come according to expectation, because attachment sees more qualities than there actually are. There are not the qualities. Or you order your favorite, what is it? Paneer tikka masala or or your favorite magni, or your favorite kazakh pizza or pasta or whatsoever. And then you look at the image and you think, oh wow, great, and then it arrives and then it's not hot and it's not tasty and it's kind of like that. But your expectations were kind of projecting things on top of it, right? So that's attachment. Attachment overestimates or superimposes qualities that are not actually there. That's one aspect of attachment. Another aspect of attachment is you don't want to be separated from your object. When you get separated from your object, from attachment, you get really uncomfortable. Yeah, so that's another aspect. Yeah, and another aspect of attachment is that, as we just saw, it's not in accordance with reality. So your expectations are never met, and it disturbs the mind. Yeah, that there's no peace of mind. The attachment is so sneaky. We often say it's like oil in a piece of cloth, very difficult to remove. Why is it so difficult to remove? Because attachment tells you, if you follow me, you get happiness. But then we follow it and we get more confused, right? So attachment is not in accordance with reality. It overestimates the qualities, yeah. And then when it's separated, it gets very irritated, yeah. And because it's not, the main thing is, because it's not in accordance with reality, that's why it causes problems, because our expectations are never met. I said there's nothing wrong with relationships, there's nothing wrong with having nice meals or parties or enjoying life, but the stronger the attachment is, the more problems it creates. Yeah. Yes, does it give a bit more idea? Oh.
Yes.
Yeah.
So attachment and grasping are separate.
Yeah, grasping is a stronger form of attachment. Yeah, we have grasping, which follows craving. Yeah, you have attachment, then you have craving, and then you have grasping. There's different levels that the intensity of the desire becomes stronger and stronger. Yeah? First you like something, then you need something, and then you want something, right? So that's the levels that the attachment becomes stronger, right? Yeah. Yeah. If you study the 12 links of dependent origination, you see something similar in the links just before becoming, before being reborn, right? You have this craving and grasping at things you like, engraving and grasping at the separation of things you do not like. Yeah? So that's kind of causing problems. Okay? Because that's another aspect of attachment. If you grave and grasp at the separation of suffering, and when you have suffering, it's very difficult. So better have suffering, just experience, okay, part of life, and then easy go. I mean, go, Or people with old age, when you get older, right? Mentally and physically, things become more difficult. The body degenerates, right? That after a certain time or a certain age is going down the hill, right? It's not going to get better. It's going to get worse. So that's a natural reality. Yeah, that old age is a natural reality. If you want to fight that, you're going to lose the fight. You're going to create a lot of problems. But if you just let go and say that's aspect of reality, then don't worry about it, because that's how it is. And then it's much easier to deal with it, right? So also there you can see that graving and grasping at the separation of suffering or the separation of old age is stupid, because you grave and grasp for something that is not there. You go against reality. Yeah. So same with the fear for death. Yeah. People say, "Oh, don't think about that. Put it in the corner." But these days, luckily, you have death cafe kind of things in various countries. People become more aware of it. Yeah. Even Carlo Rovelli, in his book on time, he says something very interesting. He says, fear for death is a fault in evolution. Why would you fear something that's a reality? It's very interesting, right? And that's. So you can see with all these examples, if you understand reality, there's less suffering, because you're going to meet reality all the time, right? So if you want to escape that reality, then it's very difficult. Yeah, you cannot escape reality. Yeah, in front. Yeah.
Thank you, Gisela. I'm Menoka.
Yeah.
I'm actually working with elderly people.
Okay.
So I find it very hard, especially the people who have no background of Buddhist philosophy.
Yeah.
And when they are in this stage, like 70s, even 60s, and they have severe fear of death.
Yeah.
And, looking at the life in a very negative way. So I cannot be talking to them about the dependent origination or the emptiness because they do not understand it. So what is the kind of teachings from our Buddhist philosophy can help at that point of time to that person?
Yeah, then you put it just in a more secular way. That's the nature of life, right? Whatever starts has to go one day. The time we're born, we know that is coming, right? So you don't have to explain it in Buddhist context, but it's just a reality. Yeah, everybody has to die one day. So then that acceptance is very important, right? When we study in the science of trauma or mental difficulties people are facing, the acceptance is the first step. If you accept things, then you take distance. If you take distance, you're less involved. It doesn't disturb you that much as before. So that is very important for them. That's why in many countries they have these aspects of the death cafe, or the kind of people can talk about death and dying, and they get used to the idea. Yeah. So then the acceptance is there. If the acceptance is there, then you take distance. If you have to take distance, then you're less involved and you have a much more clear thinking. Yeah, same as we have when we have stress, or when we overworked, or then we take a break completely, and then come back and we see things clear again, right? So that's the same with these kind of issues. If people have the acceptance, then they can take distance, and then clarity comes, and they can just think about it as a part of life, right? So that's a way to maybe deal with it.
Yeah, I do try in a secular way. I try to use the 5 omnipresent mental factors also, if they can look at the things in a way more positive way. But still, I'm looking forward that which is the kind of, because, what you said, accepting it. If they were accepting it, they wouldn't be suffering.
Yeah.
So they do not have less.
Yeah.
So they do not have that concept at all, because whole life they have been working and then at the end, this is the position. They have not been into any dharma or anything. So this is the place where I try to use the teachings which I get. So that's why I'm looking for like particular anything is there that I can really work, sharpen myself and give it to them.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, you can. I mean, Buddhism is very open to be used in very secular ways, right? As it's very clearly said, Buddhist mind science and its philosophy, you can completely present secular, right? And so there's many benefits just to, don't have to call it Buddhism or don't have to refer to Buddhism, just use that information and people can use, no? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I read about another view proposed from the scientific world, which was Hoffman. You know, Donald? Yeah.
I know him, yeah.
And he said that reality is an illusion imposed on us by evolution. Otherwise, we just give up, I suppose, or we'd kill ourselves doing what we want to do. So I don't know if you have thought about this.
Reality is an illusion. I mean, the Buddhist interpretation will be like seeing reality as inherent. It's an illusion. But the Buddhist interpretation, we don't, you know, what the real meaning of illusion is very important to be understood. So the real meaning of illusion means things appear to you intrinsic or inherent, but that's not a reality. So that's illusion. Your body is not illusion. Your mind is not illusion because your body is there, your mind is there. But the way your body appears to you and the way the mind appears to you in an intrinsic or independent way, that's the illusion part. Yeah, so that's important to make that distinction. So Lama Tsongkhapa was very clear if you read the great exposition of stages of path to enlightenment in the section on selflessness of a person. Towards the end of that section, in a few paragraphs, he actually talks about what is illusory appearance. Illusory appearance is an appearance that appears to people who come out of their realization of emptiness. Why does it appear to them? Because things appear inherent because of previous predispositions or imprints, but they straight away know that's not a reality, so they see it as an illusion. So that's important to know, that the reality is not an illusion, but how the reality appears to us, that's the illusion aspect. So that's a bit more clear, right? That you can define this more precise in the sense, our existence is not an illusion. It's pretty clear, you know, you walk here on the street and the car drives over you, you know it's not an illusion, right? Yeah. If you end up in the hospital, you know it's kind of reality. Yeah. So that reality is not an illusion, but the way the doctors appear to you, the way the screen of the monitor appears to you, appears very concrete, solid out there. That's the illusion aspect. The doctor is there, but the way the doctor appears to you, the way people appear to you, it's very inherent. This building appears to you inherent. The building is not an illusion, but the way it appears. That's the illusion aspect. Does that help? Yeah? A little bit? Not really. So there's a distinction to be made between the reality and how reality appears to you. There's two things. The reality exists, but it appears to you as an independent entity, and that does not exist. So that's the illusion aspect, that it appears as independent. That's not true. So that's an illusion aspect. Same if you look at the screen of a projector in a movie theater or on a TV, right? It appears as a real person there. You believe, when you're really into the movie, you think actually there's a real person. That's why people get emotional when they look at it, when it's just all fake, right? So then that means that it appears to you as real. That's the illusion aspect, right? The screen is there, the projection is there, the movie is there. That's not the illusion aspect, but the way it appears to you, that's the illusion aspect.
So, I mean, just one more. So illusion has its own reality then?
Yeah, illusion is a reality, right? So reality exists. Yeah, so we don't go to the extreme of a nihilistic view that nothing exists at all. Yeah, so that reality is an illusion, reality doesn't exist. That's an extreme view according to the Buddhist interpretation, what we call nihilistic. Yeah, so the Buddhist interpretation, what we call the middle way, is in between a nihilistic view and a view of absolutism. So absolutism means things exist in and by themselves. That's not true. And nihilism is nothing exists at all. That reality is even an illusion or notness doesn't exist. So that's also an extreme. So the Buddhist interpretation is the middle way. The midway between nihilism and absolutism. So it's not easy to understand, but it makes a lot of sense that things conventionally exist, but the way things appear to us in an intrinsic way, that's the illusion aspect. Yeah, think about it or read a little bit more around it. No? Yeah?
Sorry to go back to the question before. You say fear, we shouldn't fear death.
Yeah.
But if you don't fear death, then you will live recklessly.
Yeah.
And it's like good to have some fear of that.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah. So there's different types of fear. There's a fear that's constructive, and there's a fear that is not constructive. So normally when we talk about fear that is an affliction, it's a non-constructive form of fear, right? Yeah. So that's kind of, we shouldn't have that fear. Yeah, kind of, because that kind of afflictive fear, you could say, is an afflicted fear, right? That is not clear. There's no clarity. You just fear things, or you go out and maybe something happens to you. There's an anxiety kind of fear. That's an emotion. That's an affliction, right? That causes problems. But if you have a constructive form of fear of death and dying, okay, I'm going to die, or the time of death is uncertain. Oops, I better do something about it. That's constructive, right? Then you get clarity and you think, okay, this is reality. I don't like this reality. I'm going to do something about it. Yeah? So we are very clear to make a distinction between constructive fear and the fear that's actually an affliction, right? Yeah. Yeah, is that clear? Yeah.
Geshe-la, like you said, that we always crave and grasp, and there is no satisfaction. How do we change that? How do we? Because it's true, there is no satisfaction. Yes, and that is what.
Yeah.
Sometimes it becomes a driving force, and sometimes
that's why we're here.
Yes. How
that's why we're still stuck.
That's why we're still stuck in the samsara.
Take the red pill.
In that whole.
Yeah, yeah, it's very strong, Yes. It's very strong. The craving and grasping is very strong. Even Arinagajunga, in his letter for a friend, he says, craving is the root of samsara. In the sense, if you look at the 12 links, it's propelling the person into cyclic existence, right? And because that habituation is so strong, that it is spontaneous. We talked about moved out of compassion, being uncontrived, but our attachment is uncontrived,
yes,
right?
Yes.
But that does not mean is inherent strong. You can do something about it. By the power of habituation, you can reduce attachment, right? And you can even completely eliminate it and achieve nirvana. So that's possible. Why is that possible? And that's important to know. Why is it possible? Because reason number one is that attachment is not an innate part of the mind. Yeah, it's just like the clouds obscuring the blue sky. The blue sky always remains blue. Yeah, so the clouds never mix with the blue sky. So, or you can think about space junk, we talk about recently, right? The space junk never becomes a part of the earth itself, it's just around it. Yeah, so the clouds are not an innate part of the blue sky. So attachment is not an innate part of our mind, because you can develop states of mind that is free of attachment. If attachment was a part of the nature of the mind, you would never be able to generate those minds free of attachment, right? So that's reason number one, that attachment is not an innate part of the mind. So that proves it can be separated from innate part of the mind, right? Second reason is that attachment is depending on causes and conditions, right? Then sometimes the mind is peaceful, there's maybe no attachment present. Then you see object of attachment And before you know it, without reasoning, it's there. Spontaneous, single-pointed, focused, very clear. Right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Normally concentration for us is very difficult. If you sit and meditate for a minute, it's like, oh, mind goes here, there, there. But when attachment is present, no distraction. It's just only on the object of attachment. Right? So that means that attachment is generated by causes and conditions. There might be an external condition of seeing the object of attachment, an internal condition of the habituation pattern, of previous habituation patterns, and that comes to ripening when it meets its object, and then it's generated. So that proves, the second reason proves that attachment is based on causes and conditions. If you play with causes and conditions, you can do something about it. Yeah? So the nature of being impermanent. Yeah? So there's a second reason why you can eliminate attachment. The third reason is that attachment is not in accordance with reality. Right? As we saw, attachment overestimates its qualities. And those qualities are not really there according to your expectations with an object. Right? So how we see the pizza or the masala dosa or whatsoever. I don't know, North India, they like masala dosa? Not really. Yeah, okay. So then you have it, and then it's not according to expectation, right? Yeah, so that means that it's not according to reality. That proves if you understand reality, you can eliminate it. You know. So the more you understand reality, you can eliminate. So there are the main three reasons that applies to all afflictions, by the way, why you can actually eliminate attachment. And then with antidotes like, contentment or contemplating the faults of your object of attachment. If you do it for a long period of time, the habituation will completely cut it. You know, there's a story. This comes from the, I don't know, shall I tell you the story? It's a kind of a story from the Vinaya, from the Kaza. The morality for monks and nuns. You know, that this monk meditates on the ugliness of the human body. We don't do that much, but mainly for monastics. So then there's meditation in Abhidharma on the skeleton. That you meditate all the bones of your body and the bones in the body of others. And then he did it for a long period of time, and then he went back to town, and he saw this beautiful girl. You know. So he looked at the girl and he generated attachment, you know. And then she smiled at him, and he saw her teeth. And then by seeing the teeth, he straight away saw the whole skeleton, and the attachment went down the drain. Yeah, it's a very interesting example that by the power of habituation, you can counteract it, right? That's the thing. Yeah.
Thank you.
And then, of course, we talk about a few antidotes like contentment and the faults of the object of attachment, but also the root, right? If you understand emptiness, independent origination, then this grasping eye or at that object, you see it's not really there. So that's a few aspects you can look at. If you train in these methods, then over time, attachment becomes less strong. Yeah, sometimes initially attachment is like it overpowers you for a few hours, and then, or maybe days, I don't know, and or weeks, and then it becomes 1 hour, and then becomes half an hour, and then becomes a few minutes, and then becomes a few seconds. It's a slow process over years, right? And then over time, there's a very subtle kind of antidote. Later on, it's just you look at it, at attachment. You know, so when attachment comes up, you see it's just a play of the mind. Yeah? That's only possible if you've done your homework with applying the antidotes over a long period of time. Attachment is not that strong anymore. So then it just appears and you say, oh, interesting, here it comes. And you see there's a play of the mind, and then it disappears. Why does it disappear? In a similar way, it tries to deceive you, but you know it's lying to you. If a person knows you're lying, that if the person knows you know that the person is lying to you, the person will stop lying, right? Same thing with these afflictions. If you see, oh, it's play of the mind, it's just try to deceive me, and then it disappears, right? So that's a more subtler kind of way to look at it. That's later on in the practice, right? But some can be very powerful, you know? Yeah. And then it just crumbles down. Yeah. Yeah. Sounds easy, but yeah, it just takes time.
Thank you very much for your teachings, Geshe. My question is more practical. So I'm wondering, I would like to try to get more courageous compassion. So would it be a good idea to start by going to study and achieve, like you said, wisdom, or it would be better to go attain shamatha and then start by
the first one, maybe.
Yeah,
because if you have samatha, then there's dangers. Many people in modern society are very interested in achieving samadhi kind of realizations, right? But first of all, it's not easy to achieve a full qualified, go to the 9 stages of samadhi and get all those 9 and achieve calm abiding. It's not. You need many conditions. Right? So there's dangers. One danger is if you don't get it, then you generate a mental dullness, right? You have to recognize subtle laxity. And there's a danger if you get it, to get attached to this bliss of samadhi and forget anything else, forget the lamrim and just be born as one of the gods. End of the story. So what in our tradition, what they mainly emphasize is to combine the two. Yeah, to combine the special insight meditation with concentration. And so that means the analytical meditation, you focus upon the topics of the lamrim, and then on the side you do concentration meditation. And then you move gradually. That helps you to not fall into those 2 faults of either falling in the fault of subtle laxity or falling in the fault of getting attached to the bliss. So if you combine that, then it's much more stable on the long term. So study and contemplate the lamrim and do a little bit of concentration meditation together, right? And then when you do retreats later on, you do things together. Yeah, and then it will go very gradually, and then you will have less obstacles. Because it's very easy to waste a lot of time with samadhi. Many people, they want a samadhi and they go off and they get lung, or it doesn't come, and for months, and it's better to do lamrim, right? And then for sure the mind will change. And then later on, that's the thing in our tradition, if you have a connection with the Vajrayana, then you use the generation states for concentration. It's much more profound in the sutra system. So then to achieve, and also it's much safer. There's much more profound methods not to fall into those extremes of excitement and laxity, right? So that's, initially it's just very important to get a knowledge, study, particularly lamrim, and in the lamrim, there's a chapter on calm abiding, right? To really get good understanding of it, what it all means, and get some experience and try, and then slowly over time it develops in a constructive, gradual way. Yeah. Yeah. But of course, and don't get me wrong, it's very important to get calm abiding, because without calm abiding, we waste a lot of time by distraction, right? Okay.
Thank you.
Can we take a few questions from online as well? So maybe we can start with B.
Yeah.
Hi, Geshe.
Hi, Tajile. Yeah, you too.
Yeah. I understand the relationship between inappropriate attention and attachment and aversion. How we superimpose attractiveness or unattractiveness and lead to attachment and aversion. I'm not clear, though, how holding something as inherent existent would lead to inappropriate attention.
Ale. Because if you see things as very concrete or very inherent, right, and you get attached to it, you think that you will be with it, In a similar way, if you see people and you see the qualities as inherent, that prevents you from seeing the reality that those qualities are superimposed. Yeah. So if you see an object of attachment with the qualities you superimpose as inherent, then it prevents you from seeing the possibility of change, and prevents you from seeing it's just a superimposition. Yeah. Same with anger. If you want to be separated from the object of anger, the stronger you see that person or situation as inherent, the stronger the anger becomes, because you see this person is there or the situation is there. and then you want to be separated, but you cannot be separated with anger. So then it increases the anger, so to say, and it increases the aversion, so to say, you know.
Well, the way you explain it is clear.
Say again?
But my understanding, the way you just explain it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
But the way that I've heard oftentimes is that they say first there is a grasping to inherent existence, say of a flower. And then from there, we start having inappropriate attention to the flower, like imposing attractiveness or non-attractiveness. So, but why does holding something to as inherent existence will lead to us superimposing quality on it to start with?
Yeah.
Why can't we just,
Because if you grasp at things as inherent, right, and there's attractiveness or something appears as pleasant to the mind, then you see it's strong.
That comes later, isn't it?
It comes later. It's sequence, right? But that's how this attachment is being developed, and then that develops in craving and grasping. So first you see an object as inherent, then you see the qualities, then you grasp at those qualities, then you grasp at those qualities as inherent, and then attachment becomes stronger. Yeah, so it's not one mind, it's different minds, right? So you can have an attachment going to certain scholars. If you study, you attended that. If you study the uncommon or the unique affliction of the consequent school, there's different debates there. One debate is kind of, okay, you can have just a mere appearance of pleasance to the mind and wanting to have that object. That can be without the grasping of inherent existence being very strong, right? Just that means that the object of apprehension is just that the object is being apprehended as pleasant to the mind, nothing else, right? But there's also a possibility of apprehending an inherent object as appearing pleasant to the mind. There's two different minds, right? One is just a mere apprehension of pleasant appearance, and the other one is the inherent object as pleasant. So there's different types of mind playing a role. But if there's a strong grasping or at an inherent object, and then and it is a pleasant object, then you see it as inherent pleasant, and then you won't never be separated from it. And then you superimpose the qualities. And then the superimposition gives more qualities, and then you grasp more at those qualities, and then you see it more as inherent, and then it becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. It's different minds that are developed, right? You always have to see, technically speaking, seeing what is the object of apprehension of each of these minds. Yeah.
So from what you just say, it seems like when we hold something as inherent, then the next step is that we do not want to be separate from it.
If the object appears pleasant to the mind, yes. Yeah.
Okay, and if it's unpleasant, then we want to be separated from it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because then you see it as an inherent kind of unpleasant or inherent pleasant, and then the attachment or the aversion becomes stronger, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then Atishala.
Thank you, Geshe. Hello.
Hello. Yeah, thank you.
Say thank you for all your teachings from London, from everywhere you are.
Everywhere, India, London.
I just want to say I was on EB, exploring.
Okay, yeah.
The first one, and just to connect to you.
Yeah.
This time.
Good.
Thank you. Just thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. That's an easy question.
And then D, you asked the question in the chat. Do you want to
just read
do you want to say it out loud, or should I read it?
You read it.
Should I read it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't have my glasses on. I have to put glasses on.
And I mean D, maybe D, the one who asked, maybe she wanted to read it out, but I can read it out.
Yeah, you can read it.
How should one approach the study of emptiness in Buddhism? Is there an order of progression in reading the masters like Aryanagajuna, Chandrakirti, Dharmakirti, Atisha, and Lama Tsongkhapa, and others?
Yeah. So first, you start, for people who are new, you start simple, right? So then you can read a book by His Holiness, for example, How to See Yourself as You Really Are. It's a very good book on emptiness. If you can deal with that, then you read, for example, Lamrim, one of the shorter Lamrim texts. For example, the swift part or the easy part. There's 2 parts by the Panchen Lamas, right? So the swift part is a bit more elaborate, so maybe you could look at that, and it's not too complicated. The swift part of the Lamrim by Panchen, was it Lobsang Yeshe, I think, right? Is kind of a text. Then you look only at the inside section there. Yes, just a few pages. You know? If you used to that, or you can cope with that, then you can read Lama Tsongkhapa's middle-length Lamrim. Yeah, and then in the middle-length Lamrim section, don't read the whole special insight section. Just read the special insight section where it tells the selflessness of the person. Only read that section. Because there's all kind of complicated philosophy in other parts. Skip that. Just read only the section on the selflessness of a person in the middle-length Lamrim. If you've done that, then you go to Lama Tsongkhapa's great exposition of stages of the path to enlightenment, and you skip most of the philosophy. You just only read the section on the selflessness of a person. Yeah. When you've done that, then you can get exposure to more elaborate forms of philosophy within the Lamrim. You can read the whole inside section of the middle-length Lamrim, and then the whole inside section of the great exposition Lamrim. If you have done that, then you can dive into Nagarjuna, and then if you want to do it very traditional, you read Nagarjuna, then you read Buddha Palita, then you read Bhava Vika, then you read Chandakirti, you know, and then Lama Tsongkhapa or the masters on the text, on the commentaries, right? And then with Nagarjuna, you don't have to read the whole the fundamental wisdom, but you just read chapter 18. Chapter 18 is the essence, right? Chapter 18 is the chapter, especially the first verse, Keltepumpo Dagyana, the first verse of chapter 18, where Lama Tsongkhapa realized emptiness with. Yeah, so you don't have to read the whole Nagarjuna's text, you just read chapter 18 and the commentaries on chapter 18. Yeah, and then with Chandakirti, you don't have to read the whole section, but you can just read chapter 6. And with Shantideva, you can read chapter 9, for example. I think that's enough homework for the coming months or years. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry? Jeffrey Hopkins, yeah, there's also modern scholars, also Jeffrey Hopkins, and there's also very good, one of my friends in Oxford, Jan Westerhoff. He's a great scholar in middle way philosophy and Sanskrit and Tibetan scholar as well. And he wrote a very interesting book in the introduction of Madhyamika Avatara. Yeah, Chandakirti is very good. Yeah, very brief commentary on each verse. And yeah, it's just not too technical, put it that way. Yeah.
Any more questions?
Which one? The last one? Jan Westerhoff, he's a scholar of Oxford University, and he has done quite a few publications on Nagarjuna's works. He did some translations for it as well, and he recently wrote, and it was published last year by Oxford University Press, is the introduction to Chandakirti's Madhyamika Avatara. Yeah, it's also quite a nice summary. But also you can read other more elaborate commentaries. If you want a more elaborate one, then you can look at Lama Tsongkhapa's Illuminating the Intent, for example, right? Yeah? Yeah? Okay, c'est ça, as they say in French. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. And then before we finish, maybe we generate correct motivation, otherwise our merit get lost somewhere between here and yeah, I don't know where. So try to dedicate that according to our motivation. We've discussed courage, compassion, and ultimate reality. We're very fortunate. And then dedicate that to actually generate not only yourself, but all sentient beings. Generate the three principal aspects of the parts in the mind stream. Yeah? In particular, bodhicitta and emptiness. So that's one aspect we dedicate, and then we also dedicate for the long and healthy life of His Holiness Dalai Lama and all other teachers, teach the true path to enlightenment, and the spreading of these teachings, and all people come in contact and progress, without any obstacles to the stage of the path to enlightenment. So take this all to account, and then also think you, the dedicator, and the dedication And the aims we dedicate towards too are empty of inherent existence and our nature of dependence, and that's exactly why your dedication will come true, right? It's the power of the truth. Yeah, so take it into account, and now recite a few prayers. If you know them, you chant along, and otherwise you just pray. Dedicate, we just talked about. Yeah. Dagi jine sabe gewa di tendang doa gundang kambe. Keba jesun lozan draba ye tembe ningo rindu sa je jo. Kare rawe korwe zengamso. Pendan dewa malu jongwe. Chenre zegwan tenzeng gyatso ye. Jabe jite badu tengyu chi. Janjo semjo rimbo je. Mage panang gyu chi. Jeba nyamba meba yang gone gonde bewa sho toni tawa rimbo. Anange gyu chi. Jeba nyamba meba gone gonde bewa sho gewa gunde yanda lama da. Dame chigi bela longi. Saran langi yunde rajen. Doje changi goba nyudro sho tsagyo lama nangi tashi. Iran lazo nangi tashi. Marangaro nangi tashi. Jogyon suma namgi tashi sho. Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, and then a good night. safe travel. People home already home. Yeah, so we don't have to travel. Here in Delhi, it's a very big, busy travel. Yeah, okay. See you next time. See you soon. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Venerable Geshe.
Yeah.
And hopefully everybody who listened and here in person, online, and all those who will watch on YouTube later, may they, generate this.
This Prince Path.
May they see this ultimate reality very soon and increase their courageous compassion.
Yeah,
please accept this offering on behalf of Tushita.
Okay, thank you so much.
And please come again every time you are visiting India. Please come again to Tushita.
Okay,
thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah. Go on. Go. Thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. You wanna do kata traditional? Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah.